What happens when a black CEO's mother is publicly humiliated by a billionaire family and he turns down a $900 million deal to fight back? This is a story about courage, respect, and standing up against injustice. David Carter was not born into wealth, but he was born into strength. His mother, Gloria Carter, raised him in a small, quiet town in Georgia where life moved slowly and people knew each other by name. Their house was old and small, with creaky wooden floors and a roof that leaked when it rained, but it was filled with love and warmth. Gloria worked as a cleaner, waitress, and part-time seamstress, all while raising David alone. His father had left when David was just 2 years old, and Gloria never spoke ill of him. Instead, she focused all her energy on raising her son right. Even though money was tight, Gloria made sure David had everything he needed. She couldn't afford fancy clothes or toys, but she always packed his lunch with care, ironed his school uniform until it was crisp, and read to him every night before bed. She used to say, "They can take anything from you, but not your mind, baby, so feed it well." David listened. He read books from the tiny public library in town and asked endless questions in school. His teachers quickly noticed how bright he was. He wasn't just smart, he was hungry to learn. He'd sit in the front row, take detailed notes, and stay back to ask more questions. Some kids made fun of him, calling him teacher's pet, but David didn't mind. He knew where he was going even if he didn't know how yet. Life wasn't easy. There were days when the electricity got cut off because the bill couldn't be paid on time. Sometimes they had to share a single can of soup for dinner. Gloria would pretend she wasn't hungry, letting David eat the most on those nights. She'd tell him stories about giants and kings. She always ended them with the same words, "You are destined for more, David. Don't ever forget that." In high school, David's world began to open up. He joined the debate team and won local competitions. He built his first computer from spare parts he got from a junkyard. With the help of a dedicated math teacher, he entered a statewide science fair and won first prize for designing a basic logistics app. He had taught himself to code by watching free tutorials online. People began to talk about him. Local newspapers called him the hometown genius. He got offers from a few top colleges, including one from an Ivy League school, something no one from his town had ever achieved. When the acceptance letter came from Columbia University, Gloria cried, not just soft tears, but deep, uncontrollable sobs of pride and fear. She was proud of her son, but scared of sending him to a world she didn't know. New York felt like another planet. But David told her, "I'll make you proud, Ma. I promise." College was a shock. He was one of the few black students in his computer science program. His roommates came from wealthy families, and many had traveled the world, worn designer clothes since they were toddlers, and had connections he could only dream of. But David didn't let it shake him. He reminded himself every day of where he came from and who was counting on him. He worked 2 campus jobs and stayed up late coding and studying. Slowly, he earned the respect of his professors and classmates. During his junior year, David created a software tool that used artificial intelligence to improve delivery routes for trucks, helping companies save fuel and time. It was a simple idea, but a powerful one. He called it Track Logic. He started a small company around it with 2 other students. By graduation, Track Logic had 3 clients and a promising future. While most of his classmates took high-paying jobs in big tech firms, David took a risk. He chose to build his startup full-time. He lived in a tiny apartment with peeling walls and barely any furniture, but he kept working. He knocked on doors, made cold calls, and gave demo presentations at small business events. Slowly, his client list grew. More and more companies began using his software. It wasn't flashy, but it worked. Investors started calling. He secured a seed round of funding and hired a small team. Gloria watched her sons rise with quiet pride. She still lived in the same old house, still wore the same clothes, but now she had a new sparkle in her eyes. David called her every night, no matter how busy he was. He shared every small win and every setback. She remained his biggest supporter, his moral compass, and his reminder of who he was. By the time David was 33, Clogic had become one of the fastest-growing logistics AI companies in the country. Big clients were signing on shipping companies, e-commerce giants, even government contracts. What set his company apart wasn't just the technology, but the trust he built with his clients. David believed in transparency, fairness, and putting people first. At 35, he appeared on the cover of Forbes, listed as one of the top black innovators under 40. His face was everywhere, on magazine covers, tech blogs, business shows. But he never let it get to his head. He still wore simple suits, still drove a modest car, and still visited his mother every chance he got. Then, the offer came. Whitestone Holdings, a billion-dollar conglomerate with interests in shipping, retail, and AI, approached David with a life-changing proposal. They wanted to acquire TrackLogic for $900 million. It would make David one of the richest young CEOs in the country. More than that, it was validation that his company had truly arrived. Negotiations began quietly. David's lawyers and Whitestone's executives went back and forth for months. The deal was almost done. It's just a few final meetings and the papers would be signed. Everyone told David this was at the finish line. But for him, it was just the beginning. He didn't want to cash out and disappear. He wanted to use his success to lift others, to give back, and to rewrite the rules for people like him who didn't come from privilege. Whitestone invited him to a private retreat at their Hamptons estate to celebrate and finalize the deal. They also extended an invitation to his mother. David was touched. He thought it was a kind gesture, a way of welcoming Gloria into the world he was stepping into. Gloria hesitated at first. "I don't have anything to wear to a fancy place like that," she said, laughing nervously. David replied, "You don't need anything fancy. Just be yourself. That's more than enough." She finally agreed. David arranged everything first class. Flights, a personal driver, a comfortable suite. He wanted his mother to feel honored, because to him she was royalty. She was the reason he had come this far. As the trip approached, David felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This deal was the biggest moment of his career so far. He believed in what he built, but he also knew how quickly things could change. He had grown up in a world that reminded him often that success was not always enough to earn respect, especially for someone who looked like him. But he pushed those thoughts aside. He was proud of himself. He was proud of his mother. And he believed that maybe, just maybe, the world had changed enough to welcome them with open arms. He had no idea that what would happen next would shake him to his core and make him question everything he had worked for. The black car rolled slowly down a long driveway, lined with tall oak trees that looked like they had been standing for centuries. At the end of the path stood a massive white mansion, glowing softly in the evening light. It looked more like a palace than a home. Wide columns held up a balcony where a few well-dressed guests stood with drinks in their hands, chatting and laughing. Waiters in black uniforms moved between them, carrying trays of wine glasses and tiny appetizers on silver plates. David sat in the back seat of the car. Looking out of the window, next to him sat his mother, Gloria. She wore a simple but elegant, dark blue dress that he had picked out for her. Her hair was freshly done, and she clutched a small purse tightly in her lap. She looked both proud and nervous. As they pulled up to the mansion, she turned to David and said quietly, "I never imagined I'd be at a place like this." David smiled. "You belong here just as much as anyone else, maybe more." They stepped out of the car and were greeted by a tall, middle-aged man in a navy blue blazer and expensive shoes. His name was Charles Whitestone, the CEO of Whitestone Holdings, and the man who had personally invited them. "David, great to see you," Charles said, shaking his hand firmly. "And this must be your lovely mother, Gloria, is it?" "Yes, sir," she said politely. "Welcome, Gloria. We're honored to have you here," Charles said with a wide smile, though his eyes didn't quite match the warmth in his words. Younger woman came to escort them inside. The mansion was grand in every sense. The chandeliers sparkled like stars, and the walls were lined with paintings, most of which looked like they had been there for generations. The house smelled of fresh flowers and expensive polish. Gloria looked around, trying to take it all in. She walked carefully, not wanting to touch anything or step anywhere she shouldn't. The guests were mostly white, well-dressed and in their late 50s or older. They were business leaders, investors, and members of the Whitestone family. David noticed how their smiles looked a little too practiced, their greetings a little too formal. They shook his hand, congratulated him, and asked questions about the deal, but only a few of them even looked at his mother. Then came the dinner. It was held in a long dining room with a polished oak table that seemed to stretch forever. Candles flickered in golden holders. Dozens of people were seated around the table, laughing, talking, and sipping wine. David and Gloria were shown to their seats near the center. As they sat down, an older woman in pearls leaned over and smiled. At Gloria double quotes, "Oh, I didn't know they had the help dining with us tonight," she said with a chuckle. David froze. Gloria didn't answer immediately. She just smiled tightly, trying to be polite. "I'm not the help," Gloria said softly. "I'm David's mother." The woman blinked in surprise.
"Oh, well, isn't that something?"
she said, brushing it off. "I guess times really are changing." David turned his head slowly toward her, trying to keep his face calm. The woman kept talking, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, that she had said something deeply disrespectful. Others around them heard the exchange, but no one said a word. A few glanced awkwardly at their plates. One man even chuckled quietly and took a sip of his drink. Gloria kept her head high, her back straight. David could feel his blood boiling, but he didn't want to cause a scene in front of so many people. He whispered, "You okay?" She nodded slightly. "Let's just get through the night," she whispered back. But the night didn't get better. Later, people got up and moved around the room with glasses of wine. Gloria stood quietly by the fireplace, looking at one of the paintings. A younger member of the Whitestone family, a woman in her 30s, came up and said, "Excuse me? The staff usually waits in the kitchen. You're not supposed to be out here during private events." Gloria looked at her, stunned. "I'm not staff," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I'm David Carter's mother." The woman gave a tight smile and said, "Oh, right, sorry, you just looked like, well, never mind." She walked away without another word. David didn't hear about it until later that night. They were back in their guest room. Gloria told him what had happened, and he could see that she had been holding it in for hours. She didn't cry, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. David sat quietly, listening, his fists clenched in his lap. Every part of him wanted to storm down the hallway and confront every single person who had disrespected her. But Gloria placed her hand on his and said, "Don't. Not now. Not like this." The next morning was supposed to be a casual breakfast, before final meetings. David had an early call with his legal team, so he asked his mother to go ahead too. The dining area. She walked down the hall and entered the breakfast room, where a few guests were already seated. A staff member approached her quickly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but guests are being served in the main room. The kitchen staff will eat later," the young woman said firmly. Gloria looked confused. "I am a guest." "I was told no staff should be in this area," the woman said, motioning for her to follow. She gently but firmly guided Gloria out of the room and toward the kitchen. Gloria didn't argue. She followed silently, her heart sinking. She sat alone at a small table in the back of the kitchen. No one came to talk to her, and no one apologized. She ate a small bowl of fruit in silence, holding back tears. When David arrived 15 minutes later and asked where his mother was, a butler told him she was taken care of in the back. Confused and alarmed, he rushed to the kitchen and found her sitting there alone. She looked up, her eyes red but dry. "They thought I was staff again," she said, trying to smile. David didn't say a word. He stood frozen for a moment. He helped her up gently and walked her back to their room. The rest of the day passed in a blur. David attended the final meeting with the Whitestone executives, where they shook his hand and smiled, excited about closing the deal. None of them mentioned the dinner, the breakfast, or how his mother had been treated. They even knew they clearly didn't care. Charles Whitestone pulled David aside after the meeting and said, "This is going to change everything for you, son." "You've earned it." David didn't respond. He nodded slightly and walked away. That night on the flight back to New York, Gloria sat next to him silently. Neither of them spoke much. Finally, Gloria said, "Don't let what happened stop you from getting what you deserve." David turned to her. I already got what I deserved. I got you. That's more than they'll ever have. She smiled softly, but said no more. In his apartment that night, David lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He thought about his childhood, his mother's sacrifices, her pain, and her pride. He thought about every boardroom he had entered, where he had to prove himself twice as hard. He thought about how the same people who praised him couldn't even respect the woman who raised him. The next morning, his phone buzzed with messages from lawyers and advisors. Everyone was ready to close the deal, but David wasn't. He looked out of his window at the city skyline and made a decision that would shock the world. The sun was just starting to rise over New York City when David opened his laptop and began typing. His fingers moved quickly, not hesitating for even a second. His heart was beating hard, but his mind was clear. The words he was writing were simple, direct, and honest. When he finished, he read the email one last time, then clicked send. It was done. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. A deep silence filled the room. It was the kind of silence that comes right before a storm. He had just walked away from a $900 million deal. The news hit the business world like an earthquake. Within hours, headlines exploded online. Black Tech CEO cancels $900 million deal with Whitestone Holdings. David Carter walks away from nearly $1 billion. Shocking move. TrackLogic CEO rejects buyout. People were confused. Some were furious. Others were curious. Investors, analysts, journalists, everyone wanted to know why a rising tech star would walk away from such a massive opportunity. David didn't hide the truth. He gave a short but powerful statement to the press. No amount of money is worth the dignity of the woman who raised me. My mother was disrespected and humiliated by members of the Whitestone family during what was supposed to be a moment of celebration. That tells me everything I need to know about who I would be doing business with. I didn't build TrackLogic just to sell it to people who can't treat others with basic respect. This isn't just about business. It's about values.
Ow.
World took notice. Some called him foolish. Business pundits on TV shook their heads and said this was emotional, not rational. You don't walk away from $900 million over a dinner insult? But others, especially people who had faced similar disrespect, called him brave. Social media lit up with support. Hashtags like #RespectOverRiches and #David Carter started trending. Celebrities, politicians, and influencers praised his courage, and he shared their own stories of being overlooked, disrespected, or mistreated because of their race, background, or class. David tried not to look at the comments, good or bad. He stayed focused. Had a company to run and a mother to protect. Gloria, meanwhile, couldn't believe what her son had done. She sat in her small kitchen, the same one where she used to sew clothes at night just to earn a few extra dollars. When she saw the news on TV, she covered her mouth with her hand and just stared. Tears rolled down her face, but this time they were tears of something deeper than pride. It was love, respect, a kind of peace that comes from knowing all those years of struggle had not been wasted. David called her that evening. "You didn't have to do that, baby," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," he replied. "What?" "They did too, you that told me everything I needed to know about them. If I'd taken that deal, I'd be telling the world that it's okay to treat people like you don't matter. And you matter, Ma. You matter more than anything." After the initial shock wore off, the phones at TrackLogic wouldn't stop ringing. Some of the investors were angry. Few threatened to pull their money. One even called David personally and said, "You're making this personal. Business is business." David replied calmly, "When I started this company, it was personal. It still is, but not everyone was upset. In fact, some investors admired his integrity. A few quietly said they respected his decision even if they didn't agree with it. And new opportunities began to appear, surprising ones. A few days later, David got a call from a woman named Alicia Lin. She was the CEO of a major global logistics company and had been following TrackLogic's work for a while, I saw. "What?" "You did," she said, "and I respect it. That's the kind of leadership we need. We've been considering a tech partner for a while. I think it's time we talk." David flew out to meet her. She wasn't interested in buying his company. She wanted to partner with it. A long-term deal that would allow TrackLogic to keep growing while helping her company improve their systems. The partnership would bring in millions per year and allow David to keep control of his company's direction. It was exactly what he wanted. Meanwhile, the media story kept growing. People from all over the world reached out. Teachers showed videos of David's speech in classrooms. Students wrote essays about him. Churches and community groups used his story in sermons and speeches. Some even called him a hero. But David didn't feel like a hero. Still woke up early, went to the office, and worked with his team. He still kept the same beat-up old laptop he had used for years. He still called his mother every night. In private, he struggled. There were moments when doubt crept in. Had he made a mistake? Could he have used the money to do more good? Was walking away the right choice? One evening, a young intern at his company knocked on his office door. "Mr. Carter," she said softly. "Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. My mom used to clean offices at night. People never saw her. You didn't even say hello. When I saw what you did, I cried, because someone finally stood up." David nodded, his throat tight. "Thank you," he whispered. It reminded him why he did it, not just for his mother, but for all the mothers, fathers, and children who were ignored, judged, and disrespected because they didn't look rich or important. That weekend, he and Gloria took a walk in the park near her home. The sky was blue, and kids were running around with kites and soccer balls. They sat on a bench under a tree, watching the world go by. "You could have had it all," Gloria said quietly. "I do have it all," David replied. "I have you. I have my company. I have my peace." She smiled and reached out to hold his hand. "You've always been different," she said. "Even when you were little, you saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be." David looked at her and said, "I just try to make it a little better. One decision at a time." They sat there for a long while, not saying much. The breeze moved gently through the trees. Birds chirped and laughter echoed from nearby. David had walked away from a billion-dollar world where power mattered more than people. But in doing so, he had stepped into something far more valuable, a world where dignity, love, and truth were worth more than gold. And he knew in his heart he had made the right choice. After David's bold decision to walk away from the $900 million deal, life changed in many unexpected ways. The story was no longer just about business or money. It had become something bigger, a story about respect, courage, and standing up for what is right. The days that followed were busy and full of new challenges. David found himself in meetings with investors who wanted to understand why he had made such a surprising choice. Some of the conversations were easy. Others were difficult. Many people couldn't understand how someone could turn down so much money, but David didn't try to convince them. He simply explained that respect and dignity were not things he was willing to compromise. Meanwhile, Gloria's story also began to spread. People who read about her experience at the Whitestone Mansion felt angry and sad. Many sent her letters and messages of support. Some even invited her to speak at events about discrimination and the importance of kindness. David and Gloria began to receive invitations to talk on television and radio shows. They shared their story openly, hoping it would inspire others to stand up for themselves and those they love. Gloria never imagined she would be on TV, but she spoke with quiet strength and honesty. When asked about the dinner at the mansion, she said, "It was painful, yes, but I chose not to be broken by it. I want people to know that no one deserves to be treated like they don't matter, not because of their race, background, or anything else." The public response was powerful. People everywhere connected with Gloria's words. Some began to share their own stories of being disrespected. Others said it gave them courage to speak up in their own lives. At the same time, David was working hard to grow his company, TrackLogic. The new partnership with Alicia Lynn's logistics company opened doors to exciting projects. His team worked around the clock, developing new technology to improve shipping and delivery. Investors who had doubted his choice slowly came back, impressed by the company's progress, but not everyone was happy. The Whitestone family, feeling embarrassed and angry about how the story had spread, tried to keep a low profile. Charles. Whitestone issued a short public statement expressing regret over any misunderstandings, but refused to apologize directly. It felt hollow to many. David decided he wouldn't let the Whitestone silence stop him. Instead, he used the attention to push for change. He started a foundation focused on promoting diversity and inclusion in business. The foundation offered scholarships for young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds, funded training programs, and organized conferences to connect minority leaders. This was more than just business for David now. It was personal. He wanted to make sure no one else would face the humiliation his mother had endured. At one of the first foundation events, David spoke passionately. We have to change the way business is done. Not just by making money, but by making respect and fairness the foundation of everything we do. It's about opening doors for people who have been kept outside for too long. The event attracted a diverse crowd. People from all walks of life came to listen, learn, and support the cause. Many young entrepreneurs found new hope and encouragement. While the foundation was growing, David also focused on healing his relationship with his mother. The experience at the Whitestone mansion had left scars, even though Gloria never let it show. They spent more time together, going for walks, cooking meals, simply talking about their dreams and fears. One afternoon, as they sat on the couch with cups of tea, Gloria said something that stayed with David. I never told you this, but there were times when I worried you might change who you are to fit in, to make it easier for people to accept you. David looked at her, surprised. I thought I was doing just that sometimes. Gloria smiled gently. No, you stayed true to yourself. That's why I'm so proud of you. David felt a wave of emotion. His mother had always been his greatest supporter. Hearing her say this made him feel stronger. But the path wasn't always smooth. There were moments of doubt and frustration. Like some days, the weight of expectations and challenges felt heavy. People expected him to be a symbol of strength all the time. But he was human. During one particularly tough week, a key project at TrackLogic faced delays. The media started to question if David's focus on activism was distracting him from business. Negative articles appeared, suggesting he was making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. David knew he had to prove it's myself not just with words, but with results. He gathered his team and said, We're here because we believe in what we're building. We will show the world that doing the right thing and doing good business can go hand in hand. His team worked harder than ever. Slowly, the delays were fixed. New contracts were signed. The company's reputation as an innovative and socially responsible business grew. One of David's most important supporters during this time was Alicia Lynn. She not only believed in the business partnership, but also shared his vision for inclusion and respect. They became close friends and allies, often brainstorming ideas to improve their companies and the communities they served. Together, they organized events and workshops to help minority entrepreneurs. They invited leaders from different industries to speak and mentor young people. David felt hopeful that real change was happening. Despite the progress, the wounds from the Whitestone incident still stung sometimes. Gloria avoided public events. That reminded her of that night. David made sure she always felt safe and supported. One evening, after a long day, David found his mother looking at old photos of their family. She held a picture of David as a small boy, smiling brightly. Do you remember this day? She asked softly. David nodded. Of course you took me to the park. You said I could be anything I wanted. Gloria smiled, and I meant it. No matter what anyone else says, you can be anything. That simple truth kept David going. As the months passed, David became a well-known figure, not just in business, but in the fight for equality and fairness. Invitations to speak came from universities, corporations, and international organizations. But he always made time to visit his neighborhood, meet with young people, and share his story. His foundation grew stronger, helping hundreds of young entrepreneurs start businesses. Some came from families who had never had the chance to attend college or start a company. Seeing their success was one of David's greatest rewards at the same time. the Whitestone family quietly began to face consequences. Some of their business partners distanced themselves. A few former allies publicly criticized their treatment of Gloria. The scandal damaged their reputation, making it harder for them to close deals. David never gloated. He believed in moving forward, not looking back. But he also believed in justice. One day, Gloria received an unexpected letter. It was from a member of the Whitestone family, offering a private apology. They acknowledged the pain caused and expressed regret for their behavior. Gloria read the letter carefully. She showed it to David. "What do you want to do?" he asked. She thought for a moment, then said, "I don't want their money or their approval, but I want them to learn." "Maybe that's the real apology we need." David nodded. "I agree. Change is more important than words." Together, they decided to invite the Whitestones to attend one of the Foundation's events, not as guests, but as witnesses to what true respect and inclusion look like. The invitation was accepted, though with hesitation. At the event, the Whites saw a room filled with young leaders, entrepreneurs, and families from many backgrounds. They heard stories of struggle and triumph. They felt the energy and hope that David and Gloria had worked so hard to create. It was a quiet but powerful moment. The Whitestones understood that this was more than a business meeting. It was a lesson in humanity. Afterward, one of the younger Whitestone family members approached David and said, "Thank you for showing us a better way." David smiled. It's never too late to learn. In the years that followed, David's story continued to inspire many. TrackLogic became a successful company, known not only for innovation but also for its commitment to fairness and respect. Gloria remained a beloved figure in their community. Often invited to speak and share her wisdom, David and Gloria's journey was not easy. They faced discrimination, humiliation, and tough choices. But through it all, they stayed true to their values and to each other. Their story reminds us that success is about more than money or power. It's about dignity, love, and standing up for what is right, even when it's hard. Time moved forward, and David's life took on a rhythm that was both busy and fulfilling. The decision to cancel the $900 million deal had changed everything, not just for him and his company, but for many others too. The challenges they had faced together, David and his mother Gloria became a powerful example of standing strong in the face of unfairness and disrespect. Even though years had passed since that unforgettable night at the Whitestone mansion, the memory still stayed fresh in David's mind. It was a moment that tested everything about who he was and what he believed in. But it was also a moment that gave him a new kind of strength. This strength helped him grow not just as a CEO, but as a leader who cared deeply about people and justice. David continued to build TrackLogic into one of the most innovative technology companies in the world. But more than that, he built a company with a heart. His team was diverse and inclusive, representing different races, backgrounds, and ideas. David wanted to make sure that his company was a place where everyone felt respected and valued. The success of TrackLogic was not just in numbers or profits. It was in the stories of people whose lives were changed because they found a workplace that believed in fairness. Employees told stories of how David's leadership had given them confidence to speak up and be themselves. For many, working at TrackLogic was a chance to be part of something bigger than themselves. David's foundation also flourished. Scholarships, training programs, and mentorships reached hundreds of young entrepreneurs across the country. Many of these young people came from communities that had been ignored or forgotten by traditional business circles. They looked up to David not just because of his success, but because of his courage to stand up for what was right. The foundation also started programs to educate businesses about the importance of diversity and respect. Workshops, seminars, and conferences became regular events, drawing hundreds of participants. These events created safe spaces where people could share their experiences, learn from each other, and work together to build better companies. Gloria was deeply involved in the foundation's work. She loved speaking to young people, especially women, about the importance of self-respect and resilience. Her own story, how she had been publicly humiliated but refused to be broken, inspired Many one afternoon, Gloria was invited to speak at a college graduation ceremony. She stood before hundreds of bright young faces and shared her journey. Life will sometimes try to knock you down, she told them, but you have the power to rise again. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than you are, remember. Your value is not determined by others. It is something you carry inside. Her words moved many to tears. Students thanked her afterward, saying they felt stronger and more hopeful. David watched his mother speak with pride. He knew that the strength she had shown had helped shape the man he had become. It was a bond that nothing could break. Outside of work and the foundation, David's personal life also found balance. He married a woman named Maya, who shared his passion for justice and equality. Together, they built a family filled with love, laughter, and support. Maya often reminded David to take time for himself, to enjoy simple moments, and to stay grounded. With her by his side, David felt even more determined to keep fighting. For a better world, the story of the Whitestone incident became part of business and social discussions around the world. Universities used it as a case study in ethics classes. Business leaders referred to it when talking about leadership with integrity. And ordinary people saw it as proof that one person's courage can make a difference. David never sought fame or fortune for its own sake. What mattered most to him was leaving a legacy of respect and kindness. One day, at a conference on business ethics, David was asked, "What advice would you give to young leaders facing difficult decisions?" David smiled and said, "Always remember who you are and what you stand for. Money and power can be tempting, but they don't define your character. When you make choices, think about how they affect others. Choose respect, choose integrity. And don't be afraid to stand up for what's right, Evan, if it's hard." His words resonated deeply. Many people in the audience took notes and later shared his message with others. Meanwhile, the Whitestone family slowly faded from the public eye. Their reputation never fully recovered. Some members tried to change their ways, inspired by what they had seen at the foundation's events and by David's example. But for David and Gloria, forgiveness was a personal journey, not a public performance. They believed in justice, but also in healing. It wasn't about revenge. It was about learning, growing, and moving forward. In quiet moments, David sometimes reflected on the path that had led him here. From a young boy watching his mother work tirelessly, to a CEO making a stand against powerful forces. His journey had been anything but easy, but through every challenge he had stayed true to his values. He had chosen love over hate, respect over money, courage over fear. That choice made all the difference. David's story became more than a news headline or a business case. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that real success comes not from what you have, but from who you are. And in the end, that was the greatest deal of all.